Thank you. Thank you for the overwhelming introduction. I appreciate it. As Dr. Samuel said, I'm delighted to sponsor this event on behalf of Collaborative Solutions. I see several colleagues from KU. I used to work at KU in the HR realm as well as academic and student affairs, and so I participated in a lot of the diversity work that transpired over there before I left to go into consulting. And so I've been working as a strategic implementation planner for the last 3 to 4 years, and I've learned a few things along this journey. And so I wanted to share just a couple of things with you all that I feel are somewhat helpful to you as you all, whether you're in the academic sphere, the diversity sphere, the student affairs, whatever the sphere may be within the university ecosystem. I have a few tools that I think will enhance some of your efforts. So the first thing I'll talk about is effective business cases. And I've written about 100 business cases over the last 2 to 3 years, and I found that value is somewhat personal to everybody that you engage. And so it's the reason that some people will pay $150 for a pair of jeans, and the reason that some people will only pay $50 for a pair of jeans, because it's personal. It's based on your experience. And so in business, it's no different. And I found that these particular elements have been effective whenever you start to look at dissecting the value. As a part of our strategic implementation planning, what we typically do is we identify all of the stakeholders, and then we find out what's valuable to them. And I usually slice and dice by these dimensions. What's the economic value? You know, what's the financial ROI? A lot of people are interested in that, right? If I'm going to spend X amount of dollars, tell me what I'm going to receive in return. Some of that may be tangible, some of it may be more soft, but ultimately being able to tell that story is important. Some of it's functional. Are people going to be able to do their job a little bit more efficiently? Are people going to feel good about the work that they're doing? And, you know, if you think about HCM services, sometimes people are in a vulnerable state when they come to the HR department. And if they then have to jump through hoops of fire, it doesn't feel good at that point either. So, you know, what type of emotional value do you bring to the table when you articulate this business case? What's the cultural value? When you create diverse, equitable, and inclusive environments, you know, what value does that bring? Does that, you know, create better people that are prepared to go out into the diverse workforce, to create more contributions to society, and then strategic value? What advantage will we be able to gain? And again, as I mentioned earlier, some of these areas can be quantified and some not so much. But, you know, I found that these are some specific areas of value or categories of value that when we write business cases and we create strategic plans, we tease this out based on what's important to each individual. And then those stakeholders have an opportunity to say, okay, now as we create this plan, you know, how are we going to measure some of this progress that we intend to see. So the second thing I want to talk about is visualization. Visualization of data helps facilitate storytelling. And this is a study McKinsey and Company and the Lean In org perform every year. It's women in the workplace. And this simple visualization is very powerful because it tells a story about opportunity. What you can see here is that, you know, if you look at entry-level positions all the way over to C-suite, there are 3 groups that the funnel shrinks the higher they go within the organization. And then there's one group that it widens. And so it's hard to take a spreadsheet with 10,000 rows of data and come to this conclusion. And so visualization tools are extremely helpful in telling powerful stories so you then can take action, right? You know, you can ask questions that will help you get to better results. And so I didn't put this particular data point out there for any reason other than to show you the ease of being able to tell a story behind what you can see. And it's really hard. When I worked at KU, it was a yeoman's job to be able to corral data from all these sources and be able to come up with a simple visual like this. And so I would often joke and say, you know, for the dean's State of the Union remark or State of the School remarks, it may take me 2 days to put together a footnote, right? Because I'm grabbing information from multiple places. So with modern tools, things have become a lot more easy for you to be able to visualize and tell those stories. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is partnership. I'm very appreciative of the partnership that we have with Dr. Samuel and the Chief Diversity Officers Association, but internal partnerships are super important as well. You know, being able to look at the data that you have and tell that story. You know, I look at this particular example. This is a HCM example. You have the applicants and hires, and let's say you are going to talk to a special interest group and you want to know what's going on with the hiring trends and patterns. You have the ability to pull out your phone nowadays and see that information immediately. And so this may just be one example of hiring patterns over time, but you know, you can look at compensation, you can look at performance, turnover, and you can start to address some of the symptoms and then ultimately get to the root of whatever the issues may be. And this type of information can be sliced and diced by school, by department, or whatever the case may be. But essentially, the modern tools are really effective in being able to allow you to ask pertinent questions and come up with appropriate interventions. And so this is just an HCM example, but there's examples with student affairs work, academic affairs work, all of the above, finance. So start to explore some of your partnerships, not only with technology vendors and consultants, but internally, because you may have this type of information at your disposal already. You may just need to ask the questions, you know, where can I get that information? I just wanted to share those thoughts about partnership, about visualizing data, and then ultimately creating effective business cases, because those are things that when I started in higher ed, I didn't have those tools. And if I would have had those tools, I probably could have been even more effective. But, you know, I want to share those ideas and thoughts with you all. And lastly, this is just a sample of some of the partners that we work with, several Big 12 schools. But, you know, our firm understands higher education, but we also understand what's going on with the corporate world, and we're able to have bi-directional sharing, right? We can say, here's what we see to be effective in certain scenarios. This may work in your unique ecosystem, this may not, but we also can share, this is what we see within your ecosystem. And so essentially, we understand some of the pains and joys that come along with the work that you all do on a daily basis. And again, we're so appreciative to be able to sponsor this event, and we hope that everyone continues to have a day full of learning and, you know, just enjoy the time together as colleagues and take back some really cool ideas and apply them in your environment. So with that being said, thank you so much for these few minutes for the remarks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson, for your support of this work that we do in diversity and inclusion, and your sponsorship and role in the gathering of all of us here and all the different things that we do. I really appreciate that. About a year and a half ago, we had a meeting of the Big 12 Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at KU. And at the time, Dr. Jennifer Hamer, who was the Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion at KU, started an initiative that we have continued now over that time. And many of you may recall there was a big to-do across American higher education around free speech and, you know, what you can say and what you better not say and so forth and so on. And so she put together a panel, and it was moderated by one of the deans. And we kind of took that show on the road, right? We went to Baylor, and we had a panel around some things that were important to Baylor University. And we're going to kind of continue that today with a panel here at K-State. So at this time, I'm going to ask that you will give a warm reception to our panelists. We're going to start with Dr. Jason Kirksey, who is our elder spokesman kind of the group. Not elder as in age, but elder as in, opinion molding, thought leading, leadership, right? He's formerly our president. He had formerly served as the president of our organization and led us in the formative years and things of that nature. And so he's going to be one of our panelists. We also have my good friend and colleague, Misha Moore. Misha is an attorney at law and the vice president for diversity and inclusion at West Virginia University. We also have Dr. Darren Kelly. Where is Darren? Darren is the deputy CDO of University of Texas, Austin, and Dr. Jennifer Inge. Where's Jennifer? Jennifer is the interim vice provost for diversity and inclusion at our at our KU. Let me say it that way. At KU, just down the road a bit. So if you all would please come and take a seat. No, you're not getting roasted, bro. We wouldn't do that to you. I mean, Dr. Kirksey drove all the way up here from Oklahoma. We wouldn't have you drive to be roasted. We'd fly you in at least. And as I said, we've normally and routinely had a dean to kind of moderate this, and we will continue that tradition here at K-State. And we have asked, or more specifically, I have asked Dean Gesh if she would moderate this panel session. So she has a list of all the questions. And before I invite her to the podium, I'd like to read a short bio. Dean Lori Gesh serves as the Dean of Kansas State University Libraries, and she's been in that role since May of 2004. She came to Kansas State University after serving as the director of the Public Service Division at the University of Maryland Libraries. Her tour duty, if I can say that, has included, but is not limited to, serving at the University of Tennessee, Michigan State, and the University of Illinois at Chicago. She is a member of the American Library Association, where she has served as the member of the board of directors of its academic division, the Association of College and Research Libraries, and as president of the division. She has also been on the boards of the Greater Western Library Alliance, the State Library of Kansas, and the Emporia State University School of Library and Information Management. She earned a Master's of Library Science from Rosemary College, now Dominican University, and a master's and bachelor's degrees in English from Illinois State University. Ladies and gentlemen, Dean Lori Gesh.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think this is on, maybe not.
Just for recording purposes.
Just for recording purposes.
Project still.
Thank you. So we'll project. We'll use our teacher voices, not our librarian voices. It's my pleasure to moderate this panel this afternoon. I've been active on the President's Commission for Multicultural Affairs here at K-State for 15 years, basically, since I walked in the door. So it's a area that's very near and dear to my heart and soul, and it's great to have the opportunity to take some wise counsel from these folks that are up here on the panel this afternoon. To start out, we'd just like to hear a little bit more about you. Have each of you introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your leadership position within your university. And we'll go ahead and start with you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, my name is Darren Kelly, Deputy to the Vice President for Diversity and Community Engagement. I also serve as an Assistant Professor of Instruction in Kinesiology and Health Education at the University of Texas at Austin. I've been in my current role for close to a little over 2 years now, but been with the division for, this is my 13th year within our Division of Diversity and Community Engagement, and which has been around formally since 2007. In my role, I serve in a capacity on a number of committees representing the Vice President, as well as overseeing many of our student-facing programs. So when it comes to our student success programs, our community engagement programs, our Multicultural Engagement Center, our Gender and Sexuality Center, those reporting to me in my portfolio and really helping to advance a lot of the mission when it comes to a lot of our student-facing activities and ways that we can continue to support our students on campus.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Inge. I am from the University of Kansas. I started my faculty career there in 2004. I'm a professor in the School of Education and have been in an administrative role as the interim vice provost for diversity and equity since the latter part of May. And so I really see this as an extension of working as a faculty member in a professional school, right? That where our practice is theory and application, and so that's sort of how I'm approaching this particular role for the present. I report to the provost at our institution, and our Office of Diversity and Equity includes 5 different student-facing units or programs, and about 15 full-time staff members, 2 of whom then report directly to me. So Dr. Precious Porras in the back, our assistant vice provost, and then director of strategic initiatives. That's one of the things I have learned through talking with others in this association is useful to sort of contextualize is right the scope and scale of our different locations organizationally, and then sort of the human capacity as well that we have to leverage. So thanks.
So my name is Misha Poor like no money, but rich in spirit, knowledge, and faith. I am from West Virginia University. I'm the vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I'm actually new to higher ed. I've been in this role for about 17 months. I am a lawyer in my other life and a former legislator. And so when I look at certain things, I do it with a different motto. So I motivate, educate, and lead. That L has turned into lawyering, leadership, and different things. So the reality for me is you mobilize people, right? And that's what we've been working on. We get our money directly from our state, of course, our university. We're a land-grant institution. I have a staff of about 23. We are the umbrella for all, I hate the word affinity groups, but we're the the arching resource for them. And I report directly to the president of the university. When you talk about motivate, educate, and lead, the reality is we do have to motivate you to do the work. We understand it's not easy. We educate ourselves on what the needs are, then we educate you on how you should get there, and then we hope to lead you to get there. And so I appreciate you guys having us at Kansas today.
Good afternoon. Thank you, President Myers, for having us and hosting the group, and thank you to the administrators and deans in the room. I know you've got incredibly busy schedules, but I'll say to you, Mr. President, thank you for having such a tremendous commitment, because I'm sure everybody showed up in part because the president says we should show up. But we also show up in part because diversity and inclusion is important to us, and so it makes a great statement about Kansas State University, and you've got an incredible CDO and Brian Samuels, so he's been a great colleague for where he's hiding back there. He's been a great colleague for over a year, and look for opportunities to work with him for many years to come. I am Dr. Jason F. Kirksey. I'm the Vice President for Institutional Diversity and the Chief Diversity Officer at Oklahoma State University. I'm also an Associate Professor of Political Science. I've been at Oklahoma State. It'll be 25 years in January. I've been in this role 10 years. I've got a couple of alums in the room, Karen and Grant back there. It's always nice to go somewhere and see some bleeding orange. But in this role as CDO, I oversee an executive level division that is set up that's focused on diversity and inclusion. It was established in 2005. I also have the great fortune of being part of and overseeing one of the most highly decorated institutions in the nation in terms of nationally prestigious diversity and inclusion awards. And I don't say that to brag, I say that to help us as we tell our stories about diversity and inclusion. And so the communications, I think Jeff was a communications person here, that's important. In diversity and inclusion and telling stories. And so the group very graciously and surprisingly gave me a very neat award. And so I asked, could we take a photo? And so I'm sure some of my colleagues was, This guy's ego that big, he's taking a photo. No, I'm going to take a photo so I can send it back to our brand management and have them run a story. So it goes out to our alums and our internal and external constituents, and they understand what the institution's commitment looks, feels, smells, acts, and tastes like. And so D&I is about dollars and cents, and I'll quit, but I just finished the capital campaign of 5 years, had a $1.65 million goal. The foundation person was somewhere, there you go. Had a $1.65 million goal. We finished in June with $6.5 million. It was almost exclusively African-American alums and diverse alums, and so it was something that was innovative and unprecedented. And so what I would, say to you, as I say to my colleagues, is, there are opportunities for us to engage in things that we don't often think about from the research standpoint. Engaging in research, NSF, NIH don't just want intellectual merit, they want broader impact. And so getting with Brian and having his office write letters of support for those research faculty grants, get you in that .0001 funding band. So now you've got career grants and other NSF grants. So there are real aspects of D&I that we don't think about that impacts every corner of the institution, from purchasing and supplier diversity. I saw someone from athletics. Right, we help. I spend a lot of time with our coaches helping recruit student athletes to the institution because their parents want to know what kind of institution they're coming into. And so I would just say, right, as we look at this, it's a blank canvas. And so don't think about D&I as it's only this or it's only in Dr. Samuel's office. It's in President Meyer's office, and it's in President Meyer's office more significantly than anywhere else. Those HEAT awards, those other awards that you win, people only know you want them if you tell them about it. And you'd be surprised the sense of pride that it evokes from alumni about their institution, which means, right, they're willing to write checks.
Thank you. There is clearly a theme of communications and storytelling that threaded these, and we're going to continue that a little bit. We heard from Dr. Wilson about value proposition and what the value proposition is for DEI. Could you talk a little bit about what the business case is for your university and how your offices are funded and function? We'll start with Jennifer. We don't want to make you first all the time.
Okay. So the business case for the work we do, I want to put a different slant on the question, which is that in higher education, we often look to business for inspiration, for models, right? And we adopt the language and norms. Perhaps it's because of my own work as in education and my commitment to public education and such. I want to resist sort of engaging the business sort of case or value in that sense. I really think that it's important to keep central in our mind, certainly in my own mind as I do this work. We are an educational institution. And so the value, the motivation, the why we should do it is, in my way of thinking, primarily about education. And through that education, right, there are sort of ripple effects that may translate to dollars and productivity and so on and so forth. But I see it as a moral, ethical imperative that, at KU we are a predominantly white institution. If we say we value diversity and inclusion and we recognize the reality of our campus, which is that our students and our faculty staff are increasingly also racially and diverse in other ways, then to me, we don't do this work because there's a business imperative or return on investment, if we want to use that language. We do it because we need to. And that is the right thing to do, and it coincides with many of our institutional values, and sort of, that are not just about sort of feel-good like academic success, but also about educating future citizenry, right, and engaging in a democratic process and spirit and so on and so forth. So I would certainly think about the question from that vantage point, and really any chance I have to engage these types of questions, right, when we talk about marketplaces and returns on investments, there's something that doesn't sit quite right with me as I do this work and think about it, because I think that we need to continue to remember the organizational mission and think about the ways that the work we do around diversity and equity is tied to the core mission and functions of the institution, and this is distinctly an educational institution. So.
I see your head nodding.
Oh, yes, I definitely agree. I will say this. I think, so West Virginia University, we're a land-grant institution. And oftentimes people talk about land-grant, and they put it in their phrases, and they put it in their statements, but they really don't know what that really means, and that there were actually two different type of land-grant clauses and for different reasons for different groups. And so West Virginia University, I've changed it from predominantly white institution to historically white institution, which means that their goal has always been and know how to practically go out and actually recruit white males particularly. And so when you think about a university has been based upon that, with that being the foundation, it's very hard to begin to change that mindset, to see when you say value of other people, other individuals that bring talent. We're R1 institution, a Big 12, as you know, and I always tell our people we're global ambassadors. You cannot expect to bring in the talent that we're talking about and filter that out into the world unless you're actually figuring out ways to attract that. And that goes down to how you market. And I'm not talking about where you market and you get one African American or you get one Latino or you get one woman, that you actually are intentional about making sure that inclusion is filtering throughout all of your initiatives. That you don't just place it on your CDO to be the one that is doing the work. The reality is this individual is carrying the opportunities for you to be able to do the work and bringing you the lessons on how to do it. We normally come to our CDO when it's a crisis, but we don't work with them in the celebration. Right? We don't bring them in. We are not like ketchup when it comes to your fries. We are actually the ingredients to the recipe of what makes this tick. I've been in rooms before, and I like exactly what you said, the business case. I recognize that we're in a room full of professors and esteemed individuals, but the reality is if you're not being true about what you're trying to do and you're only doing it for numbers, we see that. And I'm not saying that chief diversity officers. I'm talking about individuals that are looking at your school. They see that. And so my institution, we are actually funded by the university, of course, which is a state. We are a state entity. We're responsible for 3 campuses. So I am the vice president for that. But we also have 1.8 million West Virginians that we're responsible for. And so when I took this role on, one of the things I said, well, how will you leave your legacy in West Virginia? And this was a way to do it. A predominantly white state and a predominantly white institution talking about diversity. Talking about things that people are sometimes uncomfortable to talk about. Also in challenging my team to say, listen, I understand when it comes to this work, we're very limited sometimes in resources, but that will not be our limitation. And so we're actually going to be doing the Day of Giving. Our foundation has not really, that was a surprise for them, that they were like, oh, you're actually, okay. So we've given an opportunity to have the conversation. Then it has to be a point where, listen, we have to move because we have work to do. We also are going to be writing grants. I mean, I've been in my role for 17 months. The reality is first you have to have a core team. Do you have the right people in place? I often find that you ask chief diversity officers to give you the case study for the work that they do without giving them the resources to do the case study. You don't give them the actual people to be able to provide you the information that's necessary to even give the measurables that you seek. And so if you're asking for why does it work, why is it important, the reality is you have a legacy that you're trying to leave here for Kansas. You have a responsibility to your institution, those people who are coming after you, those who have come before you, and what will it say? Will you have played your role? And I think for my institution, I'm always challenging them that. We all have our titles, we have our responsibilities. But at the end of the day, the people at this table and in this space that do this type of work, we have to be those individuals that can shift our minds based upon the crisis, shift our minds based upon the call, and be able to navigate marketing, athletics, as well as everything else, when you can just solely focus on what you have to focus on, whatever your specialty is. And so our call is that we have a land grant, that we create global ambassadors, and that we have to make them ready for the world. And in order to do that, they're going to be touching different people and different things.
Great, thank you. Dr. Kirksey.
So here's where I always get in trouble, because I always get the question of, well, why are you monetizing diversity? And you should be ashamed of yourself as a black man to put dollars and cents on it. Again, I'm going to talk to President Myers, right? Running the institution costs money. And higher ed is about money and dollars and cents. And without a doubt, without reservation or equivocation, D&I provides the highest return on investment, I call it a return on inclusion, than any other component of the institution. When you make that investment in diversity and inclusion, and it is a wholesale investment, I'm not just talking about funding Dr. Samuel's office, I'm talking about making sure in HR we understand the importance of dealing with Title VII, Title IX cases in a way that may not always involve the policy, but involve a sense of validation and comfort and welcomeness for individuals to show up and be a part of the institution. And so for me, it's about how do I keep people at the table? How do I keep the VPR for research, the athletic director, the administration and finance vice president at the table? We've got to talk the language that everybody understands. And the language that everybody understands is dollars and cents. And so for me, on my campus, most of us have same numbers. Every 100 student mix generates approximately $1 million in tuition and fees. We're run on dollars and cents. It doesn't make me a bad guy. It makes me someone who advocates and understands the importance of how to not only continue the institution being able to function, but help it grow and expand in its mission. And so talking about the dollars and cents of it is critically important, because that's the language that the constituents we need outside of chief diversity officers have to understand and recognize. I sat back there with the table of a couple of deans from architecture and arts and sciences. Student credit hours drive your budget, right? And so having someone in diversity, you got an A&S diversity coordinator in the college, that's important. That matters. That investment is going to pay a return in spades. And any colleges that don't have one, I would encourage you to have one, because it's critical to the future success of our institutions, especially those of us who are state-funded institutions, as well as those of us who are privately funded. And so putting a dollar and cents number on it is imperative, and that's what I share with my colleagues consistently. It's not just about fundraising. It's about bringing in constituents who get it, right? There's not a dean on my campus whose number isn't in my cell phone, that they reach out to me when they're trying to recruit faculty or recruit students, and vice versa. And so building those relationships are critically important. I promise I'm not texting. I'm trying to get, my kids are always after me, trying to get, new school and put my notes on my phone. But these things, so Misha was saying, oh, those are really nice. These are for fundraising. And I don't leave anywhere without it, because I might run into an alum and be able to ask them, have you ever thought about leaving a legacy at Oklahoma State? Well, what are you doing? Well, we got executive level division, we've got, highlight sheets, here's the cost of a year's tuition and how your gift can make a difference, and just getting comfortable telling that story, where we need all of you is helping us to tell that story. This isn't a spectator sport, and it's not for the faint of heart. It's heavy lifting. And the barge gets a whole lot lighter when all of us have our hands down in the muck helping lift up the barge, and not putting it on a single individual or a single area and say, hey, lift that barge. It's much easier when there's the VP for research and communications and HR and athletics and the foundation are also down in the muck with us, because it also sends a message both internal and externally. And so you're going to get those alums that ask, and will continue to ask, why in the world are we funding a division of institutional diversity? There's your answer. And not just you being able to tell it, but everyone being able to tell. That's why we fund an Office of Diversity and Inclusion, because it makes our institutions better, certainly from a social justice perspective, but it makes us more viable and sustainable and attractive. again, right, from the fundraising. I wasn't a fundraiser when I started this. That's the first thing when I met Grant and Karen, they said they're OSU. I was thinking, oh, I wonder if there's some way I can, ask them if they want to leave a legacy at Oklahoma State. And that's just become my mentality as the CDO. Yes, there are fires that we have to put out, but it's also being focused on that bigger picture. And so as CDO positions have moved and grown over the years, we're all part of E-teams and cabinets now. We've got to grow in our thinking. But again, we need all of you recognizing that and sharing in that vision and that mission that makes Kansas State, West Virginia, KU, and the rest of us better as institutions.
Thank you.
I'll just be brief and so we can move forward. I wanted to share a quote from our president from his recent State of the Union, actually his 2018 State of the University address, which is also featured on our About Diversity website at UT, that I think really answers this question. And so I'll quote, for half of UT's 135-year existence, the university did not admit African American students. Our history of exclusion and segregation gives us a responsibility to stand as champions of the educational benefits of diversity. It is vital not only that qualified students have access to UT, but that once here, they have the opportunity to work with, learn from, and alongside a diverse group of students, faculty, and staff, people who reflect the world and the workforce they will soon enter into. So for our president to be able to put this statement forward and to really have the support and really understanding and providing the necessity and why diversity is so important and central to our university is key, and it really enables us to do our work, and it enables us to really have the power to be able to go in and create and start new programs and do the things that we do. Certainly with the leadership from the top, recognizing the importance of it, it allows for us to have a great and robust budget and a large workforce. So we have we're funded with institutional funds, but also supplemented by grant as well as gift funds with a $41 million budget and 431 employees working for the division. And not only just within the footprint of the campus, but across the state in terms of having outreach centers across the state who are doing the business of making sure that our community presence is real and is genuine, and that people understand that UT is investing not only just in terms of the students who are on campus, but in the future in terms of the students and the communities that that our students come from, and making sure that they have opportunities to come to the university. And so really I think that just encapsulates all of kind of what we talked about, but really I feel like it gives us the leverage and the power we need to make sure that we can continue that work and build these infrastructures.
That's a great segue to our next question, which is, what do you see as the most beneficial aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion to our universities? And Misha, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. One of the things I find is that, and this can, maybe you all have experienced, maybe you haven't. I've had people come to me when it's right almost at the end of the deadline for a grant. And they're talking about millions of dollars for something dealing with health science or something of that nature. And they haven't talked to you for the 5 years that they got the grant prior to, but they really need an immediate response to you because the deadline is due like the next week. And they really think you're going to sign off. I mean, granted, it is millions, and it is a research institution you're responsible for, but you're also responsible for the work. And the integrity of what we do is crucially important. So for me, I think that when you say what's the best, again, it kind of goes down to what does it make, why should we do this, right? And I'm sorry, I am a public servant at heart, and so it's very hard for me. One of my prayers when I first graduated from high school was, Lord, I just want to help people. That really has always been what my life has been. And the reality is when it comes to this, we're not just something you write down on a piece of paper when a grant comes or when you think you're going to lose a grant. It is, are you doing the work in between the time of the grant being offered and the grant being given? And if you're not, they see that too. And they come back to you and they'll say, you are not doing this. Just because you change a sentence doesn't mean you've done it. I promise you, I'm sure you've told your students this, it's easier to do the work than to fake the work, right? And if you actually did the work, you wouldn't have to demand us to respond to you right at the very end of when the deadline is. You would be able to write that for us and we're just editing. We want to elevate the work that you're doing. But the reality is that sometimes that's not the case. The other thing, I think business. How many people are here from the School of Business? Anybody? One thing I've noticed is when you're talking about Fortune 500 companies, they have a lot of grant dollars, scholarship funds, opportunities for your students to be able to be fellows at their business based upon the number of minorities that are actually in attendance to your school. And they will not grant those opportunities because they do not see your true commitment to it. So because you don't do it, you also are denying that we all have a mission. We all have a goal that's set by our president that talks about the education that we're trying to give our students. At Big 12, we actually have a universal mission that we're carrying. That's why we're here in this room, that we all want everyone to elevate, not just one school over another. And so when you're talking about why should I do this work, and it goes back to some of this when it comes to value. When I was a member of the legislature, I could push something all day saying I want you to promote African Americans when it comes to employment, but there's some counties that don't have African Americans. So how do you sell it? And at the end of the day, the fiscal note is the one that makes people move. At this university, that might be the same case, and I hate to say that, but if we have to talk about if you lost 20% of your student population, or 20% of your student population spoke against your university because it did not feel welcomed, appreciated, and or valued, then that takes away from your bottom dollar. Your reputation is a part of that dollar. And if you're not investing into intentional, let me be very clear about that, the word intentional. If you're not intentionally investing into the recruitment and the retention, oftentimes we have a real benefit of recruiting people, and we'll put that on all of our literature of how many people we've recruited. But we don't talk about how many we've actually retained and they've matriculated out of the university. To me, you are lying to your population. We're going to say what it is. You're not being honest when you can't cross the same number of people across that stage. You should be able to pull them in, provide support throughout their years at your institution, and congratulate them when they're crossing the stage. That's when you've actually invested. And not only are you doing that, you're also welcoming these Fortune 500 companies or whatever the entity may be for your department or that school or that college to say, we got this fellowship we didn't have before, but wait a minute, we've increased our population by XYZ when it comes to minorities. And so now PepsiCo is coming to us asking us to give some fellowship. Or now, et cetera, is coming to us. And we're actually benefiting and giving them that true Big 12 education. And so you have to understand that if you're being true to the value of your institution, if you're being true to the mission, and you're being true to truly giving them the full aspect of the education, that you're doing them a disservice if you're not intentional about it. You're also doing a disservice if you're expecting one man and his staff to be responsible for it. You have to invest, you have to ask questions, and you have to make yourself vulnerable and uncomfortable to be true about what you've actually done to date, what you plan to do moving forward. And I promise you that that'll be celebrated and nurtured. Like, our job is not here to make you feel bad. That's not our job. Our job is to make you be reflective without a question. That you're not just saying, oh, I got it, I done my implicit bias training, I'm good. But that you're saying, wait a minute, I don't really know how to talk to minority populations. I'm not really sure, is this offensive if I put this ad out here? Ask some questions. We're happy to provide. That's why we're hired. But if you send it out there, then we have to come to be and clean it up. So let's do the work together. At the end of the day, I prefer to work together versus having to have a closed door afterwards. Please don't send nothing else. We got to do that. But anyway, so to me, the benefit is that you actually give them the education they've actually signed up for when you begin to be inclusive. Because the real world doesn't always look like our states. And we want them to be able to spread and wave that flag for our institution wherever they go. Sorry for the lengthiness. I'm very passionate.
We couldn't tell.
That was great. What about at Oklahoma State? What do you see as beneficial aspects of DEI there?
It just makes the institution better. That's it. If we aspire to achieve excellence in everything we do, and across every aspect of the institution. Part of the fabric of Oklahoma State, at OSU, we talk about diversity and inclusion is the expectation rather than the exception. Most places do a strategic plan, and if you look at it and see where diversity and inclusion is at, it's the add-on. And it can't be the add-on. It's got to be integrated throughout. In fact, if you've got a strategic plan with the separate principle of diversity and inclusion, I would encourage you to rewrite it so that you have integrated it throughout the plan So rather than 5 tenets with diversity and inclusion as an add-on, you have 4 with diversity and inclusion thoroughly and comprehensively integrated throughout that strategic plan. But again, for us, it's just, we just talk very simply. It's about making Oklahoma State University better. We too are a land grant, and having that commitment just gets us closer to what our aspirational goals are.
Thank you. And Texas.
To be brief, I would think of really the main benefits really occur from the interaction that students get from interacting with each other and from learning from each other, understanding different perspectives and different backgrounds, and being able to learn from faculty and staff who can provide those different perspectives and understanding how other people think. I think the greatest example of that will be I have the great pleasure of working with our vice president. We've done this program since 2014. We have a study abroad program. We partner with our international office to take students to Cape Town, South Africa, and study urban economic development for about a month. And in 2018, we actually took 81 students to Cape Town, South Africa. And just to be able to get students out of their comfort zone already, but then interacting with other students who they probably even seen or heard but don't interact with on a regular basis, to now then you're forced to be together. They're forced to understand and learn different perspectives and see how each other can learn from being in this new environment. It's amazing some of the perspectives that come back and some of the experiences that our students are able to bring, and they're able to leverage that for opportunities. But I mean, honestly, it's really the empathy, the understanding in terms of the different struggles our students go through and the different backgrounds. Many of our students, students of color included, are coming from homogenous backgrounds and communities where they only see people who look like them. And so now when they come to university, they have opportunity to really interact not only with students who are from their communities, but with others around the state and other students who are from around the world. It can open up new possibilities. Now, are there challenges with that? Absolutely. And there's still definitely a legacy of organizations that typically have not been welcoming to students who don't look like a certain background. But we're working through that to try to push through some of those challenges, and I think creating these opportunities to bring these students together from different communities is a powerful thing, and I think it helps them in the long run.
Great.
One of the things I would sort of ask you to do, right, is to just imagine a typical organizational chart. And in 2004, when I started my faculty career at KU, the office that I currently oversee didn't exist. And so it was in about 2009, 2010 that it became an office at the provost's office level. And one could argue, right, that with the prior offices, HR, student affairs, undergrad studies, those kinds of things, that diversity, equity, inclusion should permeate all those things. So why do you need a separate sort of office, right, in addition? So then the org chart changes, and we have an additional bubble, right, for the Office of Diversity and Equity. That's good, except the problem is that they're all separate bubbles, right? And so I think to the earlier point about wanting diversity and equity to be integrated throughout is that it's too easy to supposedly integrate it and lose sight of it, and no one is designated or has the authority or leadership, right, sort of has to speak to this and to keep it alive and continuous through these efforts. And so I would say that one of the most beneficial aspects of our office to the university is that we make, because we work with students, faculty, and staff, so faculty development and mentoring and certainly staff also, I think that, I'll say the immodest thing, I think we make all those functions better because we are thinking not just with the assumed inclusiveness that exists when we say student affairs or when we say faculty development, right? We assume that means like all kinds of faculty and all kinds of students, but that's assumed in it. And so I think we need right now this distinction that is valuable in my own thinking is we need we need programs and leaders who can function both in terms of an identity explicit way as well as an identity inclusive and implicit way, right? So that the org chart where the Office of Diversity and Equity exists as its own bubble could be potentially problematic because that's its own bubble, right? And what we don't want is for it to seem like it is our own universe and we function in a silo. but rather that we are working with others. And so I think it's a unique position for our office because we are actually involved in so many different things that exist in other offices. The idea that we should stay in our own lanes, right, is problematic to that. And so it's a unique position to sort of offer input on things like faculty recruitment and hiring, and then staff development, professional development on campus, recruiting students, and those kinds of things. And we need to make sure, so sometimes on our home campus, people will say, well, you already have a program for this. Might it be a problem that we also, right, across campus do a program that serves the same group? If underlying that question with the possibility of concern is that we are becoming redundant, I think we have so far to go before that's actually a problem, right? What we can still do a lot is make sure that we don't just have one designated person or one designated office, but that we're actually working in collaboration, in some complementary fashion, in a fashion that is strategic, actually, right, as opposed to just reactive, which is also so often the case.
Great. We had the high sign from Brian about time, so we're going to move to our last question. And this is the one that gives you the opportunity to kind of dream and fantasize about the future. But the question is, if you had unlimited resources, human, financial, and otherwise, what's the one major change you'd like to see take place that would enhance the culture of inclusion in higher education? Not a small question. We'll start down at the end.
Really?
Yeah. Seems like something the elder statesman would know about.
There you go. Well, actually, so I got caught a few years ago when I first started fundraising with the question, and a donor asked me, so what can I do? And I kind of said, well, we have these things. So she said, listen, when a donor asks you what can you do, you need to have an answer. And so I have an answer. My pie in the sky answer is to endow an executive level division of diversity and inclusion, so regardless of what budgetary constraints show up, that there's an endowment there that ensures that there will be a division, not an office. People say, he's pretentious. Don't call it an office. I'm not pretentious. It is a division. And not everybody has a division. And the fact that we have a division and to be able to endow that division to exist in perpetuity and being able to understand and recognize the potential impact that it has, because while the other offices on campus everything plays an important role. What we do as CDOs is very much similar to what our presidents do. And people hear that, no, your office is no different. I fundraise, I help athletics recruit, I work with HR, we help recruit faculty, staff, students, we do supplier diversity, everything but, probably doing the laundry. And, my mother was a janitor, and so I could do that if I needed to. But it certainly positions us to have an impact. We just need the support and the trust, right? When you hire us, you have to trust that you hired us as the right people to help move your institutions forward. So as Misha and several of my colleagues said, it's not just when a crisis happens, it's our opportunities to be proactive. And, hey, we were thinking about this in the Office of Research. Can we develop an undergraduate research program with OKL SAMP to go along with our other undergraduate programs? I'm the principal investigator for our NSF OKL SAMP program, the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation program. It's a $3.9 million grant that serves 11 institutions across the state. But from an institutional standpoint, there are also F&As that come into the institution. And so when we talk about diversity and inclusion, and when you get asked those questions, Mr. President, about diversity and inclusion, right, knowing the answers and knowing some of those numbers to talk to your donors about helps bring them on board and make them feel better about being supporters of K-State and ultimately writing bigger checks. And again, I'm a big fan of writing bigger checks, but as I look across my division of 25 full-time people, we have 4 African Americans, all with PhDs. We account for approximately $10 million in federal funds across the institutions, roughly $230 million in federal funds. 25 folks. And so the impact of what we do in diversity and inclusion has in many ways an immeasurable impact. We can't even account for all of the impacts that we make, but the ones that we can, we certainly do, and we've got to tell the story and know what those numbers are. There's probably not a number that you can ask me about that I can tell you. 88% increase in underrepresented students enrolled over the last decade, 96% increase in those students of color earning a bachelor's degree over the last decade, 100% for PhD students. And so when I can say that to my colleagues, to alums, to other folks, it gives them a sense of confidence that not only is there something really good going on at Oklahoma State, but they've got people there who know what they're doing and know what they're talking about. So again, from a foundation perspective, it becomes a great investment.
I think from my perspective, I always go back to the students, and I would love to see more scholarship funding for experiential learning opportunities. So oftentimes we have students come in, and again, sometimes it's a matter of the haves and the have-nots, and those who can afford to study abroad versus those who can't. Those who can afford to intern for free, at a competitive internship or organization and only earn course credit during the summer, and those who can't, and they need to go ahead and work for the summer jobs and not get that useful experience that many other students can get that can go towards their professional careers. And so for me, I would love to be able to expand the number of scholarships that we can give so students can go abroad. So students can then go work an internship, the unpaid internship, still earn money for that to sustain themselves for the summer, and then be able to be competitive. I mean, at the end of the day, we want our students to really have the most competitive opportunities available to them upon graduation so that they can be successful and pursue the careers they want. And again, for first generation, low income students, often students of color, it's a struggle in terms of being able to have the opportunity to be able to afford many of these opportunities. And so for me, I really want to push that envelope.
Great. Jennifer?
I would probably point to continuity and sustainability, in particular around leadership, because I do believe that if, as was mentioned earlier, if you get the right people in and you trust them to do the jobs that they were asked to do and give them sort of latitude and flexibility, right, to exercise that good judgment, that they will make the right decisions, right? They will put the money where it needs to go and work with partners and so on and so forth. But at least at our institution, and I would guess many others, there has been a lot of turnover. And we also have talked about within our own organization that the Chief Diversity Officer position is one that takes its toll and that the turnover is tremendous, right? And there are also opportunities elsewhere for people. And so I think that as we do this work, we need to not depend on just that the stars have aligned and the right people happen to be in the right place at the right time. But once they move on or are no longer there to be champions, right, for particular decisions, that it continues on. And so in my mind, that would be, right, it's too fragile an infrastructure that we've created if it could disappear, if it's tied to just particular individuals.
I'm going to say a few things. I think one, when it comes to, what I'm going to say has nothing to do with money directly in the sense of you giving more money, because I think that's sometimes we're like, we don't have the money, how are we going to get the money? Directly to the foundation, I think one of the most important things, if you don't have a actual diversity dollar campaign, that needs to be something that happens. Oftentimes, I think people say, oh, we're including alumni, which also encompasses the minority community. But I will say there is a different way of actually asking for minority dollars, and that's through relationship, and I mean true relationship. And it started from when they were undergrad. That also goes to a point of healing when you actually reach out to me to tell me how I can give back to the university, not always in dollars, but in my services, in my expertise, in my mentoring, my whatever. Oh, they see my value of what they've actually instilled in me, but also what I've made of myself. That translates possibly into some funding for the university that can also support some students that are in need. The other thing I would say is, we need to truly make certain that we're checking self. Everyone in this room, no matter of race, gender, or age, has a privilege. Everyone in this room has some level of privilege. And we have to be very sincere about sponsoring our sponsorship of students. There is nothing wrong with seeing a student in your class that may not be the top of the class, but you see something in them that if they had the right mentoring, the right structure, the right network, that they can actually be somebody that they are seeing themselves to be or want to be. And so how are you leveraging your personal network to actually help leverage the student to be everything they're supposed to be? Are you truly doing that, or are you just thinking it's enough because you're teaching them, which is nice, but are you really giving everything back? And then I think the last thing, if there was no limit, it doesn't particularly mean of resources, but of mind space. And what I will say when I say mind space, what are you personally doing to educate yourself on this work? What are you diving deep into to make sure that you check yourself? Again, checking self goes to the value of how you do your job, how you partner with different people. And so have you taken the Harvard implicit bias study? Have you seen where you stand when it comes to that? Have you taken down your offenses when people call you on things that should be seen, or do you take offense? Are you reading books like The White Fragility, Waking Up White in a World of Race? Are you doing things that people don't have to always lead you to, but lead yourself to so that you can give back? And I think if I had an unlimited mind space, that's how you begin to see the university growing, because at that point you now have a clear canvas for Brian or others to walk into a room and begin to truly have a discussion when it talks about transformational change.
Great. Please join me in thanking this wonderful panel. It was very productive.
Thank you, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate you all being here. At this time, we're going to hear real briefly from the president of the Big 12 Association of Chief Diversity Officers, Dr. Reggie Stewart.
He calls me Reggie. Call me Reg. So, really quickly, I know everybody's tired. I appreciate your time and attendance, your attentiveness. The fact that the president stays the whole time speaks volumes to K-State. We noticed that. Those are the types of things that we noticed and kind of go back. My daughter told me to put my notes in the phone, and that would make me not go through page by page. This is extremely fast. Please give another round of applause for both our panelists and our moderators. So my name is Reg Chen Stewart. I am the Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion at Iowa State University. And really briefly, I'm going to tell you about something that just took place in real time on the shuttle ride over here. But before I do that, I want to underscore the way that we do this work. Our morning sessions are dedicated towards preconditioning aspiring Chief Diversity Officers as well as sitting Chief Diversity Officers. So if you have an interest in the field and or you're currently doing the work, we spend the morning working on ourselves. The afternoon, we turn our energy towards the campus, and we work on conditioning the campus to best show you this is how you support this work. It doesn't have to be a mystery. You don't have to figure it out. We bring the training directly to you, and that is intentional. So K-State, kudos to you for taking the time. This is important professional development work for you. Thank you all for the time that you dedicated to this conversation. What you're experiencing is wave 2 of the Chief Diversity Officer. So wave 1 was historically a person who was a faculty member who was maybe friends with the president, who would advise the president on issues of diversity. I mean, that is generally how it was done across the country. Wave 2 are people who have gone to school, right? We had things like multicultural counseling classes, right? We've spent the time and effort and energy actually cultivating these careers. The goal of the association is to prepare you for wave 3, because we can't do this forever. This work is hard and it is exhausting, right? And so we're trying to precondition the campus, understanding the type of resources necessary, the infrastructure, the personnel, the office space, so that when the person comes in, they don't have to come to you with their hands out for everything, right? The campus is built and ready for the work. So just understand that the job here is to be the messenger. What we ask is that you don't shoot the messenger, right? Maybe you embrace the messenger and understand that we're trying to improve all of the organization. This is why the Big 12 does it this way. So with that, I want to tell you about something that was taking place on campus, because people say this work is about change, right? and people fear change. People don't fear change. People fear loss. And our job is to help you manage that part of the conversation. How do you get people to manage this perception of losing things as you advance diversity, equity, inclusion? That's less money that comes to my unit, that's less resources, etc. The loss is there, and we're trying to help create the level of collegiality that you understand that you're not going to lose it. I got a text message on the shuttle ride over. This morning we were talking about a project that we're working on at Iowa State. It's called the Inclusive Crosswalk Project. You may have seen it, you may have not. Feel free to Google it. So the email that I got this morning was, we made the New York Times. And so this is what was important to me about foundation work. The work that we do can actually be really positive for your university. And it can present your university in a fantastic light. This is not all about threat mitigation and conflict and all of that. We can brag about the work that we're doing, and I want you to be able to have that and feel confident and empowered to do that at Kansas State University. So with that, thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, and we're going to shift back to our work day. Thank you.